All right. Well, it's nice. We have the America's governor now on the program. I'm glad Trey Cowdy decided to stop at some point, but that's just me. Governor, first of all, it's an honor to have you. You broke the internet, Governor. You shut down the internet with all the people who wanted to watch your announcement. You're aware of that, aren't you?
Oh, it was the biggest number of people they've ever had on a Twitter deal. People told my folks that massive numbers that were joining like every minute that just totally jammed. So we're really excited about the enthusiasm. The number of people go to rondesantis.com and make a contribution. I want to thank everybody. Encourage your listeners to do the same thing. So we're pleased to have been able to break the internet and be able to reach people directly without necessarily doing the traditional campaign rally.
Well, I think that's right. And now you got a real audience. There's a big audience, 14.5 million people who want to hear from you. Let me start with this. When I interviewed you for your book, you said some things that I thought were really very, very compelling. And I don't think you'll be asked much about this, so I'll ask you. Your management style is different than most. In other words, you really do laser target things and decide how you want to approach them and how to get things done, which is what conservatives want from a Congress and a president. What is your approach?
So, Mark, we have all these things that you and I believe, your listeners, our shared principles and values, and we have a sense of what that would look like in public policy. And the idea is, okay, get that if you're in office and get that through a constitutional system so that it can stick and become the policies that govern our state or our country. And so what I do is, as governor, I studied all the authorities that I possess constitutionally, statutorily, customary policies. I knew what I needed the legislature for, what I didn't, local government vis-a-vis me. And the same thing would apply to the presidency. You understand Article 2 powers. You understand where your leverage points are. You understand your statutory authority. You also have to be willing to assert the true scope of Article 2 powers, and I think a lot of our presidents have not been willing to do that. For example, vis-a-vis the administrative state. The founding fathers would have never accepted the idea that you could get elected president, and yet the executive agencies could do whatever the hell they wanted to do. That is not the way this works. And so, I view kind of the task at hand for us is the reconstitutionalization of our government. I think we need to return the government to its rightful owners, which is we, the people. The only way you'll get that done, though, is if you go in with a clear plan on day one, you spit nails right out of the gate, and I think you really need 2 terms to be able to do it 8 years, because every time you make a movement, you fire someone, it's going to be contested by the left. There's going to be lawsuits. There's going to be this. And you've just got to be disciplined. You've got to be determined. But I don't see any other way around it, Mark, because if we keep going in this direction, then you can elect people to Congress, you can elect a president, and all the important issues get decided by unelected bureaucrats. We don't govern ourselves if that's the case.
Mm-hmm. Your wife, Casey, who we know, my family knows, we adore you guys. She's just wonderful. She suffered from cancer. She got through that, and you have 3 young kids, and you're raising them as well as being a husband and governor, and you're running for president now. And she's been by your side the whole way. And it's interesting to me that the corrupt media now are doing something they never did to Michelle Obama or Jill Biden. They're attacking your wife, for crying out loud. What's that like?
We knew that this would happen, because if she were a Democrat, she'd be on Free Fashion magazine.
Yeah.
They would be making her to be the biggest deal. But because we're conservative, we know that that's not what will happen. In reality, it'll be the opposite, where they try to really attack. But the reason they're attacking her is because they know she is an incredibly effective first lady. She's somebody that people look up to, not just women, although many of the women in Florida who've gone through breast cancer look at her as a role model for how she handled it. She's made huge improvements to communities in Florida by helping underprivileged people. And she believes in the values of this country, and she can articulate that in a way that people really get excited about. And so she's my best friend. She's a great wife, a great mother. But I'll tell you, when I'm out there on a campaign trail, there is nobody I would rather have by my side than Casey DeSantis. And the corrupt media knows that. They know she's good, so they're going to try to fabricate stories about her. But the reality is our voters see through this. They know the only reason they're going after her is because she's effective. They know when they're doing the anonymous sources that it's all fabricated BS. And so we take it in stride. We know this is just something that happens when you get into these things. You know, look, as a husband, I don't mind when they go after me because I know. I mean, it is frustrating to see, but I think the media is so corrupt and people distrust it so much that I don't think it makes a ripple with Republican and independent voters because I think they see right through it.
You know, you're probably, in terms of being, I would argue you're a movement conservative, the next movement conservative after Reagan. I think Trump is more sort of a common sense or comes to this thing from more experience. But you're there, you're ready to go day one from a principled point of view, capitalism, liberty, private property rights, unalienable rights, and so forth and so on. Don't you think that distinguishes you from most politicians? Because you've been governor now 5 years, going on 6 years, and you've stuck to your principles, your founding principles, your conservative principles, and you've used them during governing. So it's not just a white paper thing. It's not just a debate society. You've actually showed how to make them work.
Mark, I resolved going into the governor's office almost 5 years ago that I would not do a single poll about an issue to kind of tell me what to think. And I've kept that. I've not done a poll about any of the issues I've tackled because they don't come from a position of me putting my finger in the wind and trying to contort myself to conform to whatever sudden breeze of passion may be out there with the public. You know, what I'm doing comes from a matter of principle and conviction. These are things that I believe. It's just part of who I am. And my job as a leader is to kind of take those core values and ideas and shape that into public policy that's going to be able to make my state the freest state in the country. And that's what we've done. But, you know, you talk about different issues. We know going forward, one of the biggest issues is going to be which way the U.S. Supreme Court goes. I've had 7 justices I've appointed in Florida. All 7 have been rock-ribbed conservative justices. I inherited a 4-3 liberal court, and I turned it into a 6-1 conservative court my first month in office. I know what it takes to do a good job and to be a justice in the mold of Clarence Thomas and Sam Alito. But if you think about if a 2-term president starting in 24, you very well may have to appoint replacements for Thomas, Alito, which you and I know they're as good as it gets. So if you're missing, even if you do like a pretty good conservative, that's going to move the court to the left. So you've got to make sure you're finding justices that are going to do as close as possible to filling those shoes. You may also be able to replace people like Chief Justice Roberts and Sotomayor. Now, we all know you can take somebody that'll be more conservative than Roberts and obviously Sotomayor. So it may very well be if you get 8 years, you can end up leaving a 7-2 conservative court with the majority that will last for a quarter of a century. When was that ever possible in any of our lifetimes? And so a contrast to that, if the Democrats sweep in 24, what are they going to do? They're going to try to pack the U.S. Supreme Court. They're going to try to stack it with liberal justices to cancel out our modest conservative majority. So I would say 16 was really important with the Scalia seat being open. But I'd say 24, this is a generational opportunity to solidify and expand a constitutionalist direction in our judiciary.
You know, I'm starting to laugh, Governor, if people say, aren't you too young? How old are you, 44, 45? Something like that?
44.
And too young. Let me get this straight. You served as a congressman. You're on the House Foreign Affairs Committee. Before you were governor, you also served in the military when you were a young man. Tell us about that. And by the way, you're not too young to be a president of the United States. That's absurd. We've had younger. We had Theodore Roosevelt. We had John Kennedy and so forth. But it's not a matter of younger. I mean, Biden's an old man. And that's okay. But, I mean, he's older than his years. You know, he's like 120 years old in reality. You're a vibrant young man. You've demonstrated you can be governor. But the point is you do have some foreign policy knowledge, right?
Sure. I think both as a congressman, but then also as a naval officer. I was deployed to Fallujah, Iraq, Ramadi, those areas with Navy SEAL Team 1. I was an advisor to the commander. I did do temporary duty in Guantanamo back during when that was a big deal. And so I learned a lot in those experiences, learned a lot from a national security perspective in Congress. I chaired the National Security Subcommittee, thought deeply about those. I know I would be the first on active duty and has served in war since 1988 when George H.W. Bush was elected. We haven't had one since then. I think that's important because one of the problems we see with our military, it's become politicized on DEI and pronouns and climate change and all these things that are not part of the core mission. Is low. People are leaving the service. Recruiting is in the toilet. Men on day one as commander in chief. All the politics. Everybody is on the right page. Restore mission, and you will see recruiting go back up. And I'd also say, just in terms of age, I mean, one, we need some energy in the executive. We certainly don't have that now. And I will go in on day one. I could tell your listeners what you'll get out of me. One, for 8 years, we'll get somebody to be energy in the executive, and we are going to make sure we do everything we can these problems. Say, what is the best possible experience going into something like president? I would say it's being an executive state, especially during a major crisis. And no governors in our lifetime had to deal with a crisis bigger than COVID, to stand virtually alone in some of those decisions. Back against Tony Fauci, back against the left, fighting back against the media, in school, businesses, and our individual rights. And my state boomed as a result. But I was out there on a ledge, political career at risk when everyone said I was committed to suicide, because that's what leaders do. Put up.
Well, Governor, we're having a little technical problem on our end, so we have a lot of people trying to pour into. I will just tell you this. You've also always been accessible. Always been accessible. We appreciate that here, and we look forward to talking to more down the road. And I think this is a very exciting moment in our history if you're a Republican, and I think it's a very exciting day that you entered this race, sir. So we wish you all the best.
DeSantis.com, Mark. I hope your folks will come in and pitch in and help us out. God bless.
We will post it. We'll post it on our social sites. God bless you, sir. We'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
I think what you're